There are certain details in a marriage that you learn to overlook. You let the little things slide, missed calls, unexplained moods, the quiet that settles between two people after too many years of shared space. But sometimes it's not the loud moments that change everything. Sometimes it's a glint of metal on a wrist. It was a Friday morning, late August. The sun was already sharp through the bedroom window, and I was nursing my second coffee when Melissa came out of the bathroom. She was dressed in a navy blouse I hadn't seen before, her hair curled tighter than usual, perfume drifting in waves that told me she'd spent more time getting ready than she typically did for work. But what caught my eye wasn't the clothes, or the makeup, or even the faint excitement in her voice. It was the watch. Silver, sleek, expensive. Not something we'd bought together, not something I'd seen in our shared finances. Melissa noticed me noticing, gave me a quick smile, and brushed past me with a casual, I treated myself. It didn't sit right with me. Not because I didn't want her to buy things, but because Melissa had always been hyper-conscious of our budget. We'd just paid off the second car. We had an upcoming trip to Boston we'd been budgeting tightly for. And she'd always talk to me before splurging, even on a pair of boots. A luxury watch? Out of character. I didn't push it then, just nodded and finished my coffee. But a strange tightness bloomed in my chest that didn't go away. That night, she came home late. Said a client dinner had run long. The story was airtight, too clean. She even had a doggy bag of leftovers, as if to validate it. But she was distracted. Her phone lit up twice with notifications she shielded from view. I didn't ask. I just watched. The watch on her wrist shimmered in the dining room light. It might as well have been a branding mark. Something told me it didn't belong to her, or at least, it hadn't come from her bank account. The next day, I started looking. Not through her things, not yet. But I paid attention. I noted the sudden new clothes, the subtle shift in perfume, the change in the tone of her voice when she answered calls in the other room. She started going on more work lunches, came home later, showered immediately. One evening, I saw her standing in the driveway, finishing a call before she came in. The moment she stepped through the door, her voice changed, lighter, higher. "Hey, hon," she called out, as if nothing was wrong. I smiled back, but something inside me had already started to fracture. It took me 4 more days to confirm the truth. The watch. That was the thread I pulled. Melissa left it on the bathroom counter one evening, and while she was in the shower, I examined it. Beneath the polished surface, on the inner clasp, there was an engraving, "To M, yours always, L." My blood turned cold. I didn't recognize the name. I didn't need to. Whoever L was, he'd given her a gift more intimate than anything I'd bought her in years. It wasn't just expensive, it was personal. I set it down exactly where I found it. When she stepped out of the shower, towel wrapped around her, she smiled at me like nothing had happened. I kissed her forehead and told her I was heading to the store. I walked for an hour instead. I couldn't sleep that night. I stared at the ceiling while her breathing slowed beside me. I kept picturing her smile as she received the watch. The way she'd probably held his hand, whispered something soft, promised him she'd wear it always. I wanted to be wrong. I wanted there to be another explanation. But when your gut tightens like that, it's not lying. It's warning you. The next morning, I opened her laptop while she was showering again. She rarely used it anymore since she did most of her work from her phone, but she hadn't logged out of her email. And there it was. A folder labeled L, hidden under a string of generic client names. Inside were emails, some sweet, some intimate, some that made my skin crawl. Photos, plans, messages like, "Friday was perfect," and "You looked incredible in that blue dress, mine now." My hands trembled on the trackpad. I took screenshots, transferred them to a hidden folder on my own hard drive. Every word burned into my brain. Still, I didn't confront her. I needed more. I needed to know how long this had been going on, how deep it went, what parts of my life were real and which were set pieces in her performance. Over the next week, I observed. Quietly, I planted a recording device in her car, a gift from a friend in tech I never thought I'd use. I set up a tracker through our shared vehicle app. I paid for access to her text logs, hidden beneath 2-factor authentication she assumed I couldn't bypass. What I found hollowed me. His name was Luke, 36, architect, divorced, no kids. He lived across town, near the river, in a condo I remembered helping Melissa scout for a client last year. Of course, she must have met him during the sale. It started with coffee, then lunch, then things moved fast. She'd been seeing him for 5 months. Half a year of betrayal woven into the fabric of our shared life. She'd made up entire work trips that never happened. Lied to my face while I massaged her sore feet from her long day. She was splitting her world in two, and I was the silent, blind half. The worst part wasn't the sex. It was how real she sounded in the recordings when she spoke to him. How free, how playful, how unguarded. That was the woman I thought I'd married. But now I saw it. She'd given that part of herself to someone else. And I was just the roommate who paid the bills and asked about the thermostat. That was when the anger came. I spent days thinking about what to do. I didn't want to expose her to everyone. I didn't want to scream at her in public or shame her in front of her family. No, I wanted something worse. I wanted her to know I saw her, knew her, every detail, and I wanted to take something from her she could never get back. Melissa left on a Friday morning, wheeling her sleek black carry-on down the driveway with that confident bounce in her step. She kissed me goodbye, her lips lingering a little longer, and said, "Text me if you need anything." I nodded, waved, and watched her drive off toward the airport. Only she wasn't going to Chicago. She was heading to Luke's condo. I knew this because the tracker in her car confirmed it before she even got on the interstate. What she didn't know was that while she was headed to what she believed would be a weekend of passion and escape, I was putting the final part of my plan into place. I didn't rage. I didn't cry. I just packed her things. All of them. Every pair of heels, every jacket, every little box of keepsakes she once told me meant the world. I placed them into storage bins, labeled them by room, and stacked them in the garage with a note taped to the top, "Return to sender." I spent the rest of the afternoon clearing her side of the closet, removing her books from the shelves, deleting her fingerprint from the smart lock on the front door. I took down the wedding photos and filled the frames with blank paper. Silence never echoed so loudly through a house before. But that was only the beginning. Later that evening, I drove across town to Luke's building. I didn't go up. I didn't confront him. I simply left an envelope with the doorman addressed to Luke from Melissa's husband. Inside were the screenshots, emails, texts, booking confirmations, all time-stamped and arranged chronologically. No commentary, just facts, just truth. I knew Melissa had told him I was checked out, that we were technically separated, or whatever narrative made her feel justified. But this would crack through that delusion like a bat to a windshield. The next morning, I received a text from her. Just one word, "Why?" I didn't answer. An hour later came a call. I watched it ring. Then another. Then 3 more in the span of 20 minutes. She left a voicemail. "Robert, what the hell did you do? Luke's furious. He thinks I lied to him. He's not answering me. Call me back." Her voice cracked by the end. That was the first time I'd heard fear in her tone. Real fear. And it didn't stop. By the time she returned Sunday night, the house was dark. Her key didn't work. I watched from my parked car 2 blocks down as she stood on the porch, trying the lock again and again. She pulled out her phone, tried to call me. I blocked her number that morning. She knocked for 15 minutes before finally sitting on the steps, head in her hands. I didn't go to her. I didn't say a word. I simply sent her one text from a prepaid number. "You gave your time, your body, and your heart to someone else. Now you can live with him, too."